Story 1. Read books, magazines, and newspapers. Watch portable televisions. Play portable gaming systems. Listen to music on digital audio players, tapes, or compact discs. Right? Sleep. Story 2. I love the meme where everyone looks at their phones these days. It shows a picture of people on a bus in the past, and every single person has their head buried in a newspaper. Story 3. Enjoyed their downtime. People back then didn't need to be entertained during their entire waking hours. It was okay to daydream and get lost in their thoughts. Story 4. I read books. For a year, I commuted over an hour to and from work. I read all of the original Game of Thrones series and a significant amount of Robin Hobb's work. I recall another friend who trained for 2 hours every morning, and he, along with everyone else in the train car, just went to sleep. During my travels in Thailand, everyone just sat holding chickens or looking out the window or chatting. It was quite pleasant. Story 5. Read the newspaper, watch a movie on a small television screen on the bus, listen to music being played, and look out the window to ponder. Story 6. On the train, I refrained from sitting with my head and shoulders bowed. They told me time is essential. No wandering is allowed. But then I saw a pretty girl whose features stood out in the crowd. I went 10 minutes past my stop waiting for her to look around. Story 7. Read books, magazines, and newspapers. Solve crosswords and other puzzles. Play handheld electronic games and listen to music on MP3 players, personal cassette tape players, and CD players. Story 8. With Game Boy, cassette, and CD players, books, newspapers, and crossword puzzles, everything you do with that phone is just not conveniently combined into one handheld device. Story 9. Read a book. I used to commute to London for over 10 hours a week and would regularly finish 2 books each week, or I would take a nap. To be honest, I still read and take naps, but I find I spend more time looking at my phone than I would like whenever I am on a train or bus. The other day, I had to travel to London, and every single person in the carriage, except for myself and one other individual, was looking at their phones. Story 10. It's called talking. You open your mouth and produce understandable sounds for one person or multiple people around you. It's not loud or anything, just small talk. Story 11. I listen to music through a music player and headphones while enjoying the scenery. Occasionally, I dozed off, especially on one specific bus journey where the view wasn't particularly exciting. I would always wake up at the exact same spot. I never read, as it makes me feel sick. Honestly, I haven't changed my habits. I will not travel without my headphones and music. My phone stays in my pocket or bag. Story 12. I know this is surprising, but it is possible to simply sit and exist without engaging in any form of distraction or entertainment. It is actually beneficial for you. Story 13. There were pocket audio players that either used cassette tapes, CDs, or had storage memory for MP3 files. Other than that, we read books and magazines, talked, and watched outside the vehicle windows. Some of us even took naps. Story 14. I used to carry a book with me everywhere I went. Very few people did. I'm guessing many either have rich inner lives or lack awareness. Story 15. I used to buy the newspaper every day on my way to school since my train ride to 9th grade was about 45 minutes long. It was quite interesting, and I looked forward to it each day. Story 16. Staring out of the window to avoid eye contact or simply reading books and magazines, but 90% stared out of the window. Story 17. I read comics every day on the way home from school and reviewed the subjects that would be tested on my way to school. I rarely traveled by bus otherwise. Story 18, there was something called MP3 player before smartphones. Before that, there were Discman devices. Prior to that, we used cassettes. Game Boys were also a thing before smartphones existed. And before that, there were books, magazines, or simply looking out the windows. Story 19. Newspapers are sometimes left on seats for others to read. Typically, there are boxes for free newspapers at most bus stops and stations, containing publications such as the Phoenix, Metro, or Village Voice. Story 20. I grew up riding the buses and subways in New York City in the 1980s. People engaged in various activities on public transit when they were not looking at their phones. reading books and newspapers, eating snacks and full meals. During the era of radios, Walkmans, Discman, and iPods, they listened to music, sports, or the news. Passengers worked or did homework, knitted or crocheted, talked to those traveling with them, or stared out the window while lost in thought. It wasn't uncommon to see people changing their clothes or applying theatrical makeup. Sometimes individuals fell asleep, which seemed like a risky choice. I have a vivid memory of my dad screaming at someone for trying to rob a little old lady who had fallen asleep on the subway. Some people talked to those sitting nearby, but it was often considered annoying because they were usually either preaching, behaving inappropriately, or attempting to solicit money. A small percentage of individuals picked pockets and stole from unattended purses. I witnessed people sleeping, engaging in intimate acts, urinating and defecating, using hard drugs, and participating in violent altercations. I saw a couple of stabbings, some drug deals, and instances of solicitation. I am pretty sure there was a woman who rode the bus route I took to school. She always had metallic green eyeshadow, a long thin nose, and looked like she might enjoy chubby kindergartners as a snack. On the subways, some people would move from car to car, playing music or dancing for tips. Sometimes their performances were good, sometimes bad. Occasionally, they would shout at passengers until enough people gave them money, and then they would jump off at the next stop before the transit police caught them. A few times, the entire subway car was lightly mugged instead of entertained. If you had enough time and noticed performers approaching, you would move to a different train car to avoid them. So, public transit in the 1980s was quite an experience. Story 21. A lot of women knitted back then and took their current project with them in their purse with 3 or 4 different yarns. Some people read a book or the local news, as that was the only real way to get information. Story 22. I read a book. I went through most of Stephen King's and Tom Clancy's works while commuting on the subway in New York City. Where else can you find 40 minutes of uninterrupted reading time each day? Story 23. We read and smoked, looked out the window and smoked, had conversations with our fellow travelers and smoked, or listened to music on portable cassette players and smoked. There was a lot of smoking. Story 24. Is this a joke? They did the same thing everywhere else. They lived their lives. I can't think of anything more pathetic than someone so enslaved to their meaningless device that they literally can't conceive of how to exist for 5 minutes without it. Story 25. They had human interactions with each other. You could meet someone there and make plans together. It was amazing. Story 26. My mom and I had phones at the time, but when we traveled about an hour on the train each weekend, we used to play various games. A card game called Macau was the most prominent. Story 27. I used to go to high school by bus, which took 40 to 55 minutes one way in the early 2000s. At first, I had a compact disc player and books in my backpack. Toward the end of high school, I had a creative MP3 player with 1 gigabyte of memory. There were still no smartphones, so books and magazines were the other ways to pass the time. Story 28. I had books and a portable cassette player, with both the compact disc version and the cassette version. Sometimes, I would just take a nap or watch the scenery. Story 29. Read books and newspapers. Listen to music with earphones on personal devices. People watched quietly. Chatted with strangers if you are that sort. Mostly, it's fine to not have constant stimulation. Sit quietly and daydream. Story 30. I used to listen to cassette tapes on my portable cassette player on my bus ride to school as a child. I would stay up late and secretly record songs off the radio. Many songs began with snippets of DJs saying things like, "You're listening to Croc, home of the newest top rock hits." Story 31. This was before smartphones, but I used to do my makeup on the bus on the way to work. I was required to wear makeup while working in cosmetics at a department store, and this saved me time in the morning. Story 32. Read books or magazines. Look out the window. Talk to our companions. On long trips, we might also knit, draw, or find a group to play cards. We had to carry a large bag of supplies to entertain the kids during long train journeys. Story 33. Newspapers were sold at the stations in the morning and late afternoon, reminiscent of the good old days. Story 34. Sit at the front and flinch when the trees smack against the window. Look at the stub plates. Watch the insects fly up toward the window opening and then go back down again, amused by their endless struggle. Story 35. Magazines, books, and playing with a Game Boy were part of my childhood. Sony Walkmans and cassette players were popular, although not as much as the later MP3 players and iPods. I also remember eagerly tearing open a sealed new video game and reading the manual on the way home. However, most of my time was spent daydreaming and being present. On train journeys, it is still easy to switch off and enjoy the scenic view. Story 36. People would talk to you and ask about your day, or you would read the newspaper. If you were lucky, there might be a table where you could play cards. Story 37. Yes, read books or magazines. I always had a notepad and would write if words were flowing. I tried to pay attention to my surroundings, to know where I was, see where I was going, and be with the people around me. Story 38. I glared at people. As a large biker with a beard, a bald head, dark sunglasses, and dressed in all black, nobody would sit next to me. That changed when I challenged their perception of reality by sweetly offering my seat to little old ladies who had just gotten on the bus. Story 39. They read newspapers and paid as much attention to their surroundings as people do today. Just a different form of distraction, same but different. Story 40. If they were in groups, people actually talked to each other. Buses and trains were generally much noisier than they are now. For solo travelers, you would typically see people reading books or listening to music. It was common to see newspapers left on bus seats. Story 41. I remember those days when I listened to my portable music player while reading a newspaper that had actual news in it. Story 42. Read a book. Talk to people. Relax and enjoy looking out the window while feeling perfectly comfortable doing nothing. Story 43. Converse with people. Can I have those days back? Please? Laughter and a beer on a train. Pure bliss to me. Story 44. We used to look at things like the internet, but in the form of books. Sometimes we would look out the window. That was our live stream. Story 45. There used to be these things called newspapers, which many people bought at the station to read during their journeys. If you didn't want to buy your own, it was easy to read the paper held up by the person opposite or to glance over the shoulder of the passenger sitting beside you. Story 46. Read the daily newspaper, but there was an art to it. You would fold the paper in half vertically to avoid bothering the person in the seat next to you. Story 47. I actually experienced a time in my life when I didn't have phones. I would look out the window, read a book, daydream, and at one point I also had a handheld game with Tetris on it, so I played that. Story 48. I had a disc player with a 30-second anti-skip feature and a CD wallet holding 50 discs. I also had a few books in my bag and spare rechargeable batteries. I loved it. Story 49. Stared out the window and thought of nothing. We call it mindfulness now. We used to do it for free without noticing. Story 50. I tend to get car sick, and sometimes even train sick. Naturally, I look outside the window and try not to let the existential dread set in. Story 51. Read incredibly large printed newspapers that took up about a seat and a half and left black ink on your fingers. You had to snap them open to the next page, which annoyed everyone. Story 52. Newspapers looked the same, with little attention paid to the content. However, it was done using newspapers. Story 53. Listen to music, read a book, take a nap, spend time with ourselves, and have inner dialogues. People are so distracted by their screen time these days that many of them would likely experience a mental breakdown if it were removed. This is due to the overwhelming thoughts that suddenly arise, which can no longer be pushed away or brushed aside. Story 54. Used other means to ignore each other. Read a newspaper or a book, listen to music on a portable cassette or CD player, and stared out the window. Story 55. Read newspapers, books, or anything to avoid talking to strangers. Story 56. Pretend to sleep or find other ways to ensure you don't make eye contact with others who might interpret that as an invitation to talk to you. The reluctance to engage in conversation is not a new phenomenon. It is simply more manageable today. Story 57. I would read physical books, sleep, or simply watch people. Many people listen to music or eat while chatting with a friend. I saw someone bring their laptop to play Civilization. I also want to mention that there were physical newspapers available for free at bus stops, designed for reading on the go. Story 58. Gunpei Yokoi played with a calculator, which inspired him to create Nintendo's Game & Watch, ultimately leading to the Game Boy. Story 59. You know those things made of paper with many thin sheets and words on them? We read those. We also had tapes, compact discs, and the radio which we could listen to music on. Here's the kicker. There was no monthly fee, and it didn't drop out in the subway. Amazing, right? Story 60. Journal, do homework, read, take breaks, play games, listen to music, and observe others until they ask if I am staring. Story 61. Socialize normally. You would ride the same bus every day and see the same people. You would talk to each other, saying things like, "Hi, lovely weather today," or "How's it going?" You might even meet a girlfriend or boyfriend. I rode the bus before small gadgets took over. Story 62. Read the paper or a book. Stare out the window. Create stories in your mind about the other people on the bus. Story 63. In 1981, while on a Greyhound bus crossing North Dakota on New Year's Eve, midnight struck, and the lights went out. Someone began softly singing, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." Eventually, at least half the bus joined in, but it never got loud, and there wasn't a following song. It was magical. Story 64. Some buses had televisions and VHS players, but they were often unreliable. If you were seated too far back, you could hear the audio but not really see it, which wasn't ideal. During my college days, I tried to travel with friends so we could chat. Sometimes I would strike up a conversation with a stranger, similar to what happens on a plane nowadays. Cassettes and portable cassette players were also popular. Story 65. I was looking at the world of which I am a part, reading a book or a gaming magazine while listening to metal music. Story 66. Roll joints, throw items out of the window at passing pedestrians, and clog the toilet with toilet paper, the usual. Story 67. They had bars, drank, smoked, and had conversations with others during long trips in the Wild West. You could hire someone for bathing and shaving. Not sure what else. Real cowboys. Not today, just dreamers. Story 68. Stare out the window and daydream. Chat with strangers. Read. Organize my purse or backpack. People watch. Try not to fall asleep. Story 69. Listen to music, read, smoked cigarettes, talked with other riders, stared into the void, ate, and counted red cars. Story 70. In the past, we had paper tablets filled with words and images. Most required a small subscription fee, but you could purchase individual copies at newsstands. Story 71. They read newspapers. Story 72. If we are traveling for a couple of hours, I will probably just stare out the window. I might try to engage someone to pass the time or read a newspaper if one is lying around, as they sometimes get left behind by previous passengers. For cross-country travel by bus, I would have a comfortable pillow and a paperback book. Sleeping and reading are about all you can do. On the train, there is an alcohol car. Story 73. Some type of music player, MP3. Before that, a tiny radio to look out the window. I would read a book or magazine if I wanted to, and sometimes I would do homework if I needed to. Story 74. Anxiously, I stare out the window at unfamiliar sights, realizing that I am on the wrong bus and cannot decide which incorrect stop to take. Story 75. It creeps me out when I see someone on the train without headphones and not on their phone. Can you please stop observing everyone and listening to their conversations? Story 76. Snooze, chat, read, daydream, do homework, play board or card games, listen to or make music, spend time with friends, eat, and play video games. Story 77. It is hard to believe that you are so distracted by your phone that you can't take 30 seconds to consider the many things someone living before smartphones could do on a bus. This is a very sad post that reflects poorly on you. Story 78. there were things called books and newspapers. I know you young people have probably never seen one. We also like to talk to each other and just look out the window. Of course, these days I have to admit I can't do without my phone to entertain me. Story 79. As a teenager in the 1990s, I decided to get an ice cream cone before boarding my train. With only standing room available, I had to hold on to a pole with one hand and my ice cream in the other. Every time I tried to take a bite, I nearly wore it. So I stood there, gripping the pole with one hand while the ice cream slowly melted all over my hand and dripped everywhere. Everyone around me just stared, and I felt like an idiot. I don't know if having a phone would have stopped me from buying an ice cream before getting on the train, but it might have distracted the other passengers if they had theirs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.